Christmas Eve, 1945. The air in Fayetteville, West Virginia was cold and still. Inside the Sauter family home, warmth and excitement filled the rooms. 9 children had been celebrating. They played with new toys. Their parents, George and Jenny Sauter, watched them with tired, happy eyes. The older children were allowed to stay up late. The younger ones were already tucked into their beds upstairs. It was a picture of American life. A family safe in their home. A night filled with peace and the promise of Christmas morning. But that peace was about to be shattered into a million tiny, sharp pieces. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, a strange sound broke the quiet. Jenny Sauter woke up. The phone was ringing. She answered, but the voice on the other end was unfamiliar. It was a woman asking for someone Jenny didn't know. There was strange laughter in the background. Jenny told the caller she had the wrong number and hung up. She noticed the lights were still on and the curtains weren't drawn. The front door was unlocked. She thought it was just the older kids forgetting. She locked the door, turned off the lights, and went back to bed, thinking nothing more of it. Just 30 minutes later, she woke again. This time, it was to the smell of something burning. A thick, choking smoke was pouring into her room. The house was on fire. George and Jenny screamed, grabbing their youngest child who slept in their room. They rushed outside into the freezing night air. They looked up at the second floor. The top of the house was engulfed in flames. 4 of their children had escaped with them, but 5 were still trapped upstairs. 5 of their children were in the burning rooms above. The fire was roaring like a monster. George Sauter ran to find his ladder. He always kept it leaning against the side of the house, but the ladder was gone. It was not where it should have been. He tried to drive one of his work trucks to the side of the house to climb on top of it. He wanted to reach the upstairs windows, but the trucks would not start. Neither of them. The engines were dead. He looked for a water barrel he kept nearby. It was frozen solid. Every attempt to save his children failed. The family could only stand there, helpless, watching the flames eat their home. The fire department did not arrive quickly. The fire station was only 2.5 miles away, yet it took hours for help to come. The fire chief said he couldn't get a hold of his firefighters. He had to call them one by one. By the time the fire truck finally rolled up the road, it was early morning. The house was no longer a house. It was a smoking black hole in the ground. The roof had collapsed. The walls were gone. All that remained was a pile of ash. A lone chimney stood like a tombstone against the gray dawn sky. The fire chief told the grieving parents the terrible news. The fire had been too hot, he explained. The children must have been incinerated. There would be no bodies to find. The official report said the fire was an accident. It was caused by faulty wiring. For George and Jenny Sauter, this explanation felt wrong. It felt too simple, too clean. How could 5 children burn to ash with no bones left behind? Jenny had worked at a crematorium. She knew bones remained even after hours in a 2,000-degree fire. The house fire, while intense, would not have been that hot. The family's grief was mixed with a cold, nagging doubt. The questions began to pile up. Why did the phone ring right before the fire? Who was the strange woman on the line? Why was the ladder missing from its usual spot? Why did both of George's trucks suddenly refuse to start? These were not small things. They were strange, dark coincidences that did not fit the story of a simple accident. The Sauter family began to believe their children were not in the ashes. They believed something far more sinister had happened that night. This was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a haunting, a mystery that would consume a family for the rest of their lives. It would become a dark legend in American history, a tale of 5 missing children who vanished into smoke and shadow. The official file was closed, but for the Sauter family, the case would never be over. They were about to begin a search for answers. In 1952, George decided on a permanent way to keep the search alive. He erected a large billboard along Route 16. On it were the pictures of his 5 lost children. Beneath their images, bold letters spelled out the story of the fire and the kidnapping. The billboard became a local landmark, a haunting fixture on the West Virginia landscape, a public accusation aimed at the law enforcement he believed had failed him. More than 20 years after the fire, in 1967, a new clue arrived. Jenny Sauter went to the mailbox one day and found a letter addressed to her. Inside, there was no letter, only a single photograph. It was a picture of a young man in his mid to late 20s. His features bore a striking, undeniable resemblance to their son Louis, who would have been around that age. On the back of the photograph, a cryptic message was scrawled. The meaning was a complete mystery. Energized by this new lead, George Sauter once again sprang into action. But the trail went cold almost immediately. The private detective could find no trace of the letter's sender. George Sauter passed away in 1968. He went to his grave convinced that his children had been stolen. After George's death, Jenny Sauter continued the vigil alone. She never removed the black mourning dress she had put on after the fire. Jenny passed away in 1989. After her death, the remaining Sauter children decided to take down the billboard. The search, which had consumed their family for a lifetime, was finally over. So what really happened on that Christmas Eve? Was it a tragic, freak accident? Or was it a meticulously planned crime? The evidence points overwhelmingly toward foul play. The most compelling theory remains the one rooted in revenge. George Sauter's vocal criticism of Mussolini made him a target. The local authorities, whether through corruption or fear, appear to have facilitated this disappearance by obstructing the investigation and promoting a false narrative. The photograph of the young man thought to be Louis Sauter is perhaps the most haunting clue of all. It arrived 20 years later, a ghost in the mail. Did he know his family was looking for him? Was he unable to contact them? Or was he unwilling? The cryptic message on the back seems to refer to one of his surviving brothers. It feels like a desperate coded message from a life lived in the shadows, a final, heartbreaking attempt to reach across the void. Today, all that remains is the story. The site of the Sauter home is an empty lot. The 5 who vanished are frozen in time, forever young in black and white photographs. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty. The case is a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not supernatural, but human. And sometimes the most haunting questions are the ones that are never, ever answered.